Recording in progress.
You can step in. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Programs and Services, regular meeting of the Programs and Services Committee. We are being audio and video recorded, so be careful. That's really more warning to me than it is to any of you that I never heed. So, joining us at the beginning of the meeting, we have Councilors Lyle Baker, Julia Maliki. Online, we have Councilor John Oliver. I'm Josh Princeman, Chair of the committee. Those are the only councilors I'm seeing at the moment. I see Commissioner Banks online. Acting Chief McMains is on, and Commissioner Ciccarello is in the room. Good evening, everyone. First item on the agenda is item 339-24. If the three of you want to come to the table, you can, or you can come one at a time, or you can stay there, whatever you feel comfortable with. But item 339-24, this is the appointment of Mary Fitzgerald to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Again, we'll do these one at a time, but let me just up front tell you what we normally do is I read the item. Then I'll give you an opportunity to say why it is that you're interested in serving in the capacity for which you've been appointed. Then open it up to councilors to have an opportunity to ask any questions they may have. And then we'll take a vote amongst the committee. So that's our standard operating procedure here. So Ms. Fitzgerald, would you like to tell us why it is that you are interested, if you're interested, I assume you are because you're here, in serving on the Parks and Recreation Commission?
Sure. So I am a lifetime Newton resident. I worked for the Recreation Department. It was my very first job working at the pool, Gap Pool. I worked at Newton North High School as well. And I used to be a skate guard at the Cove. And so the Recreation Department was always a really important place for me. And also I sort of defined myself through recreation and activity, physical activity. I've been a teacher in Newton for close to 20 years. And I just felt like when I saw there was an opportunity to step in, it was a really great opportunity not to only continue my interests, but also to sort of give back in terms of what I hope to bring to the committee. I'm very interested in helping families who are sort of more marginalized and unable to access programs, probably mostly due to just a lack of awareness of what's out there as far as our programming. And I think it's a really great time to use that lens with the new position for the for Newton Public Schools with the new hiring of the family engagement director. And so I'm hoping that there could be some overlap with my background in education paired with my love of the outdoors and the parks. And so I hope you decide to bring me on.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Let me see if any of our counselors have any questions they want to ask.
So I'm going to have a question for all of
you.
Should we wait for them all to do their introductions, or?
Or we were going to do one at a time.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So I am interested. I'm one of the people who is not a fan of the artificial turf, but we have lost that battle. So what I'm interested in from all three of you, since you have some sort of quasi-powers, would you be supportive of posting warning signs at the artificial turf fields, specifically addressing dangers of heat exposure? I personally measured the temperature difference between real grass and plastic grass on an 82-degree day. It was 90 degrees real grass, 130 plastic grass. And certain towns around the area have started posting warning signs about that, and also about the importance of like washing your hands after you play on artificial turf. So right now, we don't really seem to have anyone in the city who is supportive of or interested in getting warning signs like that up. And it would be helpful, I think, for not just the teams, but more for regular users who aren't necessarily being advised by a coach.
So speaking for myself, I am a big fan of evidence-based information and education, and I think it's important for people to understand what the risk factors are, if there are any connected to the activities they choose to take part in. I'm not really sure what's in the works as far as the recreation department, as far as labeling and signage and things like that, but I think it's important information and needs to be available and accessible at some level.
Okay, so would you support?
I support that, yeah.
Because I think it's, you know, hand out a piece of paper, people can forget about it, but if something's criminally posted at the field, anyone who just shows up
Yeah,
is aware of the need to, you know, watch their heat exposure, plenty of hydration, extra hydration.
and back to what I was saying, about the school department, that is also good information for health classes to share with students.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay,
Do you want us to answer?
no, I gotta introduce her, so, yeah. So, yeah, let me get to you. We'll do it one at a time. That can be a standing question. We can come to each for that question, in due course. I'm not seeing other hands at the moment. So I want to say that I am proud to support a fellow UMass grad, because I do think that's important. Also, someone who grew up in Newton.
Ward 14, or Newton, no, Ward 3, sorry.
Yeah.
So did you want to make a motion?
Oh, are we doing it? Okay, one at a time. I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay, so Councilor Malakhy has moved approval. Seeing no further discussion on that, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, no abstentions. That is 4-0. So that's approved. So it'll go to the full city council, which is in what, a week and a half? Something like that. For approval, you don't have to be there. And the expectation is that it would get approved at that time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item is item 340-24. This is the appointment of Mark Belthusen to the Park and Recreation Commission. Same deal. Would you like to tell us why?
Sure.
I guess what, a Wolverine, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
And I did go to one game when I was there.
Did they win?
I don't know, but it was really a lot of fun.
Oh, okay.
102 people in the stands, very exciting. And actually, that segues to my focus. So actually, I was appointed to the, I'm Mark Feldhusen. I live in 44 Cherry Street in West Newton. I've lived there for 35 years. And I was confirmed in December of 2019 to be in the Parks and Rec Commission as an alternate. So I'm here today, hoping to convince all of you that I should be the Ward 3 representative, because we lost Midge Connolly. Yeah.
We didn't really lose her, she just moved.
Right, that's right. She's in Canada. She was the Ward 3 person. So there was an opening and I went for it. I really enjoyed my time on the commission. As an alternate, we speak, we have ideas, we can bring up anything we want. We can generally vote, which is great as well. I spent a good chunk of time reviewing and rewriting the commission manual, which is really, really interesting, especially when we look at the history of where we came from today. In recreation, people talk about passive versus active. I think the commission today leans more towards active. I'm not wild about the word passive because it sounds like we're kind of sitting around and letting things happen. I understand why it's used with open space because it's more about hiking and observing and enjoying the scenery. But I think that that's actually a really active activity. And so what I see my role is to always bring awareness of the open space, the need for the commission to fulfill its mission, which includes preserve our natural areas for future generations. Commission attempts to balance the concerns of natural open space preservation and passive recreation with those who organize sports and active recreation by involving these and other interested parties. So as much as I think recreation is great, I like to play some sports. I think that we also really need to take care of the natural world. And when we can, in parks and areas, use them as much as possible to expand the support, for example, of pollinators. One of the things that I did at Wellington is that I dug a big pollinator bed. If you can see it, it's great. And it's along a tennis court, which is sort of a swath of grass, because I thought, we need this, and people need to see how beautiful these flowers are. And indeed, like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come, the pollinators arrived. So it was great. It was very, very satisfying. So I find the commission to be a pretty dynamic group. And really enjoyed my time there and hope to continue through the term which I am completing, which would be the last 2 years of Midge.
So your time as an alternate did not dissuade you from going full time.
Oh, no,
Right, real deal.
Yeah.
Did you want to respond to Councilor Malachi's question about the
Yeah,
signage?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think one of the other part of the mission here is that Parks and Recreation Commission provides oversight and advice to the mayor, city council, and Parks, Rec and Culture Department regarding sports, recreation, parks, open space, and the preservation of scenic beauty throughout the city. And so I think there, it's incumbent upon us to understand as much and clearly maybe learn some things from you because you've spent some hands-on time doing it. And then if it's warranted, if it makes sense to do that, and it sounds like it does, then I believe we should make people aware of what the dangers might be. I'm not 100% against artificial turf, especially in a city where we are so hemmed in on all sides and we need our fields. And our fields are so busy. Be great if we could have all turf, but I'm not sure how realistic that is. So to have a few artificial fields seems okay. But I think as the science develops, we should do a better job and sooner rather than later so that we have our act together for next sports season to post whatever information seems appropriate, even if that's just the update, even if that's like the latest knowledge that we have.
And I'll put all of you in touch with Ellie Goldberg, who's been particularly working on this with people from other towns to try to come up with a best practice, most informative.
That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you. It's a great question.
And I just want to say your work at Wellington Park showed up great with the Monarch Festival this weekend.
It was
And
very fun.
got a good picture of you doing the
Oh, good. Thank you.
yeah, so I'm happy to meet you.
Okay, Councilor Malachy has moved approval. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I believe that's 4-0. I believe we've also been joined by someone identifying as Councilor Raina Getz. Not a member of the committee, but welcome nonetheless, if that is you, in fact, Councilor Getz. If it's not Councilor Getz, person, you are still welcome. So just to be clear.
It's me.
Great. I mean, like you are welcome here, not like you're
Oh,
welcome.
you're well, thank you.
I feel like the more I need to say, just to be clear, I'm being totally unclear, so.
It was great.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, so same thing to you, obviously it was approved about a week and a half, whatever that is, the full council meeting, Monday and a half. Expected to come up then. Next item, item 349-24, the appointment of Caitlin Cusick to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Excuse me, would you like to tell?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's better to go first or last. Too many inspired words. I'm Caitlin Cusick, I'm from Ward 7, Councilor Baker's from the full board. I've lived in Newton for about 11 years. And I chose to live in Newton one day when I was on a long run from the Back Bay into Newton and was running through off the Commonwealth carriageway through different streets. And I bring that up because it's an important part of how I use the city as a very avid runner. It led me here, and quite literally I use it almost daily as a runner. I'm a mom to two very active boys. I'm a teacher at the Underwood Elementary School here in Newton, and I am a heavy user of the Newton Parks and Recreation fields, opportunities, and programs. I would not be overstating when I tell you that I think between my two kids, we have tried every single sport and program through Parks and Rec at this point in time. I think it's very important to serve the city you live in. I think it's important from a service level, but I also think it's how you engage with neighbors and it's how you meet people. The closest friends I have in Newton, I have met through recreation, whether it's my own recreation or the recreation of my children. They've become the neighbors I've gravitated to, the neighbors I turn to, the neighbors I trust for advice and opinions. And it's not lost on me that the many opportunities that the Newton Parks and Rec Department provides is what has made my life here so rich. So when I think about serving the city, I think about paying back where I've been most rewarded, and that's through Parks and Rec. It's where my kids are most rewarded. And I think it's time that I have a voice in that, because I appreciate it so much, but also because I see and feel how important it is. As a heavy user, I think the value that I will bring to the commission is that I'm out and about in many of our recreation facilities quite literally every day. As a teacher, I'm on playgrounds right up against Farlow Park with the new beautiful pond that I'm getting balls out of every single day. But it looks really nice. And again, as a parent and a recreational user myself, I'm out and about in the facilities, and I think that provides real-time information and access. And I hope to be able to pay back the city for all that it's given my family. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for being here. Do you want to respond to Councilor Malaki's question?
Yes, of course. Thank you. I think it's a great question. Turf is part of the reason why I'm here. Why? Because it became so apparent to me, not turf itself, but that this is a citywide issue with so many different opinions. And at times, as a resident, you can become so obsessed with the way you're using and utilizing something that it's hard to hear the other sound. It just becomes noise. And turf is where I really keyed in on Parks and Rec and how decisions were made and started to really pay attention and consider how I could have a role in this. So I think it's very appropriate, your question. I don't feel prepared to completely commit to an answer for you because I hear your side and it makes logical sense to me that there should be information. But I also hear from you that there's resistance, and I haven't heard from other people on why they would resist it. So I feel like to be a commission member, I would want to understand two perspectives before answering wholly for you. What I will say is that if I were to support signage, I'm very aware of the developmental needs of children walking onto fields. And fear before any event for a child is not a great strategy. So I would just want to support developmentally appropriate signage, knowing that many of the fields are used by our city's youth.
So, thank you very much, appreciate that. Councilor Baker.
Well, first, thank you for being a resident of Ward 7, although I'm sure you didn't choose your resident on that basis. It's one of those things.
It's one of the top 8 wards in the city.
He's really on it. But it's not a formal part of the Parks and Recreation Commission, but the Newton Commonwealth Golf Course, is part of Ward 7.
I
I'm very
do most of
interested.
my work sitting in the parking lot.
Wow.
My son is a very active golfer.
It is, all right, good, all right, well, this is good, then we should talk offline about that, because it's very important that resource continues to thrive and be maintained. And it's not part of the Parks and Recreation Department deliberately, it's run by a commission, which is independent, but appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. I was instrumental in many years ago in actually the city acquiring it, so it's been a continuing interest. So at some point we'll talk about it. I'm delighted to know that your boys are interested.
We use it almost every day because I'm married to a golfer and I have 2 boys that golf. One who's very obsessed, but also I should point out that they started golfing at Snag, starting New at Golf, which was a Park and Rec program on Saturday mornings at Commonwealth Golf Course years ago for 3- and 4-year-olds with like Velcro balls and clubs that you actually signed up through Parks and Rec and it was hosted at the golf.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Well, I'm delighted to hear it. So, yes, me.
The commission has a seat on the golf commission.
Generally, does.
I put on the agenda the other night,
Yeah.
but then nothing came.
Right.
So if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to look into that. Because the Ward 7 representative would be natural.
That would make sense. That would make sense.
Especially because you've got experience with but that, I don't want to take time away from that. At some point offline, we can
I
talk.
appreciate it.
Okay, I'll be glad to move her forward.
All right, Councilor Baker has moved approval. Any discussion?
I'm gonna abstain for tonight because I'd like to get you some information first, because I'm a little puzzled by the idea that there would be a problem with asking parents to make sure they're.
Oh, no, I'm not saying not asking, just doing, like, having appropriate images with the signs and doing it in a way that isn't fearful, but just cautionary. Just the language choice.
Send me your email and I'll be
Happy to talk with you.
okay.
I see that Councilor Oliver has raised his hand. I will just chime in very quickly to say, though, that I appreciate your answer because I think it's very important. And I think as a commissioner, you do need to hear from multiple people on especially issues that are of pressing concern. I know there are many people who are opposed to the installation of turf anywhere. I know that the Parks Rec and Culture Department believes it is an integral part of their fields and their recreational field strategy. So it's contentious. Let's just put it that way. I'm very supportive of their plan at the moment. So I appreciate your answer, but it is certainly a contentious issue and one that, like you said, people make very good points on both sides, and it's important to hear from them. And I think the people who are opposed to the installation of any turf in our city make some very good points. It's just, you know, a question of hearing everybody out before you sort of move forward with a policy decision. So,
Thank you.
Councilor Oliver.
All right, well, you just took my entire thunder and my comment. I couldn't be more supportive of listening to both sides. Councilor Maliki and I are on opposite sides on this one. But with that said, this isn't, we're not here to debate that, but thank you all for your volunteerism, your willingness to serve. And I think it's fair to say, welcome to the fray.
Thank you. All right. All motion made by Councilor Baker to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
3, those opposed, and those abstentions.
Well,
3 to 0 to 1 passes. Congratulations. Again, week and a half, it'll be before the full council, at which point it will become official. I will remind you all that you do not have to stay. You are welcome to stay, but you do not have to. And I'd like to hear more about Snag, because I've been playing golf for 40 years, and I feel like that's where I should start. So
Thank you. Thank you all very.
thank you all very much, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Appreciate it. Next item we have is item 90-24. This is requesting an update on leaf blower landscape registration and enforcement ordinance. We're taking these two items together?
Yeah.
They're separate. Okay. And for that, I believe Councilor Chiparello is here, and Acting Commissioner McNamee is with us online. I don't know if you're gonna say something up front, but I'll give Commissioner first opportunity, and then I'll come to you. Okay.
Before you go to them, I just want to bring.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Councilor Baker. You can wait. Who did I miss?
Chris.
Hey, Kristen Annunziato.
That's right.
Did I nail it?
You did.
Okay. Assistant City Solicitor
That's correct.
Annunziato. Okay, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us and bringing your perspective. Councilor Baker, my apologies.
No, just, this is a continuation of a conversation we've had earlier. And we've gone through the summer and we have the benefit, and I hope that he would be here so we could thank him in person. But our part-time leaf blower enforcer is someone that I met personally recently, but I don't think many of you have met unless you've been blowing leaves awfully.
You wouldn't want to meet him at that
We
point.
wouldn't want to meet him at that point anyway. But I just think that I would not want the conversation to begin without acknowledging that I think he has made a very positive impact and will continue to make one. And I've been impressed with his professionalism and his demeanor. It will be no surprise to the acting chief of police that he's an ex-police officer, so that he's been well trained, and I think that has added to his ability to be successful. So I think that the thrust of what I would like to explore after we have a conversation with both of the heads involved here is again how we can strengthen this and where we go from here. But I'd like to give them a chance to report on what progress has been made since our last conversation, and because this is a dual responsibility for people who may be watching our ordinance provides that both the inspectional services and the chief and the police department have responsibility. And most of it, I think, has evolved into working with Mr. Uriarty when he is on duty as the primary enforcer, but he can't be there all the time, and the police are the backup, and he's not. So, Mr. Chairman, it's up to you. He will hear from first, and then I have a few questions to pose.
Commissioner?
I can give you an update on what we've done so far this year in 2024 for compliant landscapers who are registered and have been stopped by Mr. Edrahai. 183 compliant landscapers who were stopped using blowers, but were using compliant blowers, which meant no tickets, no enforcement was necessary. I know this is something that the committee wanted to for us to follow. That's 183 for 2024. For last year in did I say 2023 or 2024? 2024. Okay. 2023, the whole year, we had 261 compliant landscapers. Violations wise in 2023, which is the entire year, we're only talking half the year for 2024, were 260 violations. So far this year in 2024, our violations are at 140. Warnings that were given out in 2023 total year, 211, and warnings for 2024 so far, 104. So we're roughly through about halfway the season, because now getting close to fall, you're going to see a lot more leaf blowers and hopefully more compliant landscapers.
Interesting, but correct me if I'm wrong here, Councilor Baker, but the restrictions are more difficult, more onerous in the summer.
In the summer.
So I would have expected those. but
No, well, because
I would have expected more calls that turned into compliant leaf blowers in the summer, because I feel like there's a perception that any leaf blower usage is a violation.
but
But I may be wrong about all that.
not all leaf blowers in the summer, as long as you can use an electric.
No, I understand. I said there's a perception
Yes.
that all leaf blowers, which is why I would have thought there would be an elevated level of calls turning into a compliant usage finding.
Typically in the fall, you're gonna find more leaf blower usage because of the leaves, and
Yeah.
because of cleanups.
That makes sense.
So he's gonna be seeing more blowers being used, and hopefully he's gonna stop them and find out if they're either compliant or in violation.
Thank you. Councilor Baker, do you have a question?
Well, I want to come back to it, but I thought we might hear from the police about their statistics, because you keep separate records from ISD, and one of the things we're trying to do is to make sure that both sides talk to each other, but.
Acting Chief McMains.
Thank you, councilors, for the opportunity. I unfortunately do not have a lot of stats tonight. I've been somewhat busy over the last week and a half or so with other things. I unfortunately am coming into this much later than I would have liked to. As you folks know, I have not been to any of these meetings with Chief Carmichael and the council talking about leaf blowers. What I will say is I was particularly involved in this with Chief David McDonald when he first came on, when this ordinance first came out rather. And we did have a policy in place where our officers were required to make stops, respond to these calls, to write reports, etc. At some point, we stopped doing that for various reasons. Chief Carmichael, I'm sure, articulated to you folks at some point. Since that time, I've had conversations with our Newton Police Association, the Patrol Officers Association, about what their thoughts are on writing tickets, citations. Some of the issues Chief Carmichael probably brought up with you folks is post regulations and complaints against our officers. I think that's been alleviated with the newest version of the ordinance, where the owners themselves and perhaps the homeowners are cited for these versus the users. With all that said, I think our policies are going to go back to the way they were, where we start enforcing those as we were supposed to have done from the get-go. Again, I apologize I don't have stats, but I'm happy to follow up on this at another time if those are needed or wanted.
Let me just comment, Chief, I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to call you that for the moment, just for convenience. I think that it is an important component of the enforcement artillery, so to speak, because you are able to respond, and certainly, as I understand it, if there's Mr. Girardi is available and the dispatcher gets the call and he can pick it up, he does. But there are times when I think your officers, and we're really trying to get into the compliance end of this. We want to get everybody to understand that they need to go along with this ordinance. We're not interested in making money out of it. It happens to be producing revenue, and I would rather see less revenue and more compliance. And so I'm delighted to hear your sentiments, and I think that maybe we can have a conversation offline if that's convenient for you at some point. We understand you've been busy on other matters, and that's certainly appropriate. So, but I'm glad to hear that sentiment, because I think it is. We've designed the ordinance now so that the offense is the owner's offense, the operator being the operating company, not the physical operators themselves. And also, I think that what I'm learning from experience elsewhere, and it's beginning to be the case here, that if the landowners know that they are subject to a violation, I was talking to someone in Maryland, they find that is a very effective remedy for the landscapers. The problem that I will talk about in a minute, and the data here are quite extensive, is just the importance of getting information to you all in a way that's timely and effective, so that your enforcement time is well spent. And there are some examples from other jurisdictions that the clerk here can provide us of some of the things where you can provide information above and beyond the address. One of the things I was going to encourage, and we don't have to do it tonight, but further conversation about how the enforcement information is collected. Because if you go on, I actually had a curious situation where I went into the ISD to try and report myself, but I wanted to see what was happening. And I went in and I put my own address in, and automatically I found I just reported myself. And I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. So I had to call up and say, wait a minute, when you run the numbers, this is not a violation. This is a test.
Did you get a warning?
No. Yeah, they arrested me on the spot. So I think there's some improvements and enhancements that can be made to enable the public to participate in the enforcement process without being a burden to the department. And I'd like to explore those with the consent of the committee after the fact. I think it's difficult to do in this forum, but I'm delighted to hear from the chief and his views. There is one other thing we should talk about, but I would like to have the members of the committee who've got hands up and would like to be heard, is where we go from the long run, because there are cities and towns, Cambridge and Lexington, for example, who are moving to an all-electric regime. And there are other communities around the country who are doing the same thing. We're taking up a whole lot of things in zoning and planning about electrification. And the question is this something that Newton should consider? But I didn't think we could decide that tonight, but I do think it's important to understand that this is going on and might make the enforcement process easier, because you're trying to, you at least understand the difference between electric and gas power. So that's just background, but I want to yield to other members of the committee for questions or comments.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. I don't see hands at the moment, so I'll just add my 2 cents, which is, I want to echo what Councilor Baker said in terms of the goals of the committee, which to my recollection were compliance. That was the main thrust of that. It was, how can we get better compliance? How can we encourage people to comply? How can we inform people of what they need to know to comply? That's what led to the flyers you see, the efforts, the website, all sorts of different things. One of the mechanisms we set up, I think appropriately, was the warning system, and also holding the homeowner responsible, coupled with the exemption for a homeowner who has selected a known contractor who has been deemed by the city to have registered with the city, and who has attested that they know the rules. that was all geared towards informing people of this potentially complicated ordinance and getting better compliance to make life a little bit better for the people of Newton. My question after all that is whether the preference of either the police department or inspectional services would be to have, as Councilor Baker alluded to, a uniform ordinance that is applicable year round, whether it's all electrical, whether it's no leaf blowers, or whether it's, anything flies, no pun intended. Would there be a preference for a uniform ordinance applicable year round? Do you think that would be either more easily enforceable or more easily understood by the residents? Or do you think we've struck sort of the right tone here with summer rules and rules for the rest of the year?
When you say uniform, what do you mean by it?
Well, currently, the use of gas leaf blowers is prohibited in the summer, but allowed in the fall as long as they're under a certain decibel level. Would it be better to have a prohibition on gas leaf blowers year round? Would people understand that? Or, you can use gas leaf blowers in the summer below a certain decibel, so at least the rules are the same year round. Yeah. Without speaking to what the optimal policy is, do you think there's a need to look at having a uniform policy year round, or do you think that we're able to get people to comply and the education is working?
I think the education is working. I think the numbers show that. I think that having the landscapers are running a business. Okay. I think we should also keep them in mind as far as what they have to do and what they have to do to keep their customers happy. I think this is a fair ordinance. I think this is an ordinance that in the summertime, when most people are out and enjoying the summer, things are much quieter now, theoretically. And in the fall and early spring, they have their cleanups to do that residents in the city would like to have done, as long as they meet the rules and they're compliant. That it's a good ordinance. I think the public would understand the ordinance a lot better if it was just cut and dry, straight electric all the time. I mean, it's pretty easy. But I think we're making progress with the ordinance the way it is.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. I'll allow you to answer if you want, Acting Chief McMains, and if you don't feel prepared to answer, that's okay too.
No, I think that's fine, and I don't disagree with Anthony. I think making it simpler would be good, but we're here to enforce the law no matter what it says. I think one thing I did want to say to Councilor Baker, he brought up an interesting point about Chuck Edrahai, our former police officer, retired officer who now works for ISD, an outstanding officer. He does this full time. That is his sole purpose, is to do this. Our officers not only have to enforce this, they also have to respond for calls for service. They have to write police reports. I'm not making excuses. I just want to explain how oftentimes when we respond to these calls, again, I don't have the stats, but I'm happy to get those. Oftentimes those leaf blowers are no longer out, or the landscapers themselves are often gone. And that's because we have to stack calls because officers have other responsibilities. Not that we can't perhaps discuss having our own seasonal leaf blower officer. But again, that's one of the reasons why I would suggest that any reporting that we did in the past had nothing showing, or the leaf blowers weren't out or whatever. But again, I think educating the public is key to that. And I think that's happened over the last X number of years with the ordinance being out and Officer Edrahai and our folks educating those that we've spoke with. So I'm not so sure it's going to help, but I don't think it would hurt either.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Well,
Councilor Baker.
yeah, I guess in terms of the reporting, I can just report in my neighborhood. I've become an expert, like we all have, I think, in the tunnel. This distinction between, and there's still some violations, and the problem obviously is getting to them in the time you need. But I think that one of the questions I have is that if there were information that citizens could provide, and indeed the ISD form provides some places for additional information. I haven't found it, but somebody so you can read the reports, there are a couple in here that are quite extensive. That if we could make it easier for people to provide information that would enable, Mr. Edrahite and your office and the police need to be able to respond on an emergency basis. But given the fact that we're trying to keep the landscapers operating right, whether there's some additional enforcement that could go on in effect, when you get a certain pattern, even if you can't get there, but you're beginning to see credible evidence that you find credible, that landscaper is not complying, even though if the police or Mr. Edrahite can't get there, whether there's any offline communication that can occur, you know, that is not instantly in the situation, but a communication to the company, because they're mainly registered. And if you say, look, we've got evidence, we're not issuing a ticket, but we've got evidence of non-compliance, and we would like to have you explain what's going on, whether that's a possibility at all for your office.
Not sure if I understand what you're trying to say.
So if you had evidence through the 311,
Yeah.
and Mr. Garvey can't get to all of those, the police can't get to them, but you've got a pattern, and there's information that's coming in from citizens that says X landscaper may not have been caught, but they're using the improper equipment.
Okay.
Okay. Part of my concern is not just the residents. My concern is that the landscapers who are complying deserve protection and not be put at a comparative disadvantage with somebody who's cutting corners.
Violent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you, is it possible for your office to communicate with those folks independently somehow through
With the
letter,
311?
through letter or any kind of, in other words, if you see a pattern of violations, what are your options?
Typically, patterns of violations that we usually see are usually phone calls to us or phone calls from the police department, where when this information comes in or left on the entry machine, where Chuck gets all the messages and emails. He knows the time when people state the time when their landscapers are there or the landscapers are there that may be violating. And he can schedule his day because he works often different hours all the time. And what he can do is he can set up a time, okay, I know so-and-so landscape is gonna be on Mill Street at 10 a.m. typically on Tuesdays. He will go there and he will wait for him, or typically run into him while he's there. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Well, no, that's helpful, but if, for example, people, you get patterns of violations or reports.
Yeah.
Can you communicate with that company and say, look, we're getting these reports? They may say, no, we're not doing it, but is there any conversation offline that doesn't involve a ticket?
No, not typical.
No, so what I'm asking is, could you be, would?
I mean, we could talk with them on, like, I don't want to say off the record, but give them a call, and say, hey, you've been getting calls that you guys have been using the wrong blower. That's a difficult position because we're not sure if they're using the wrong blower, and we're not sure if we're getting the correct information from the residents. So we don't want to insinuate that these landscapers may be violating the ordinance without really knowing.
So you really need to be an on-site.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So information will probably be most useful to you if it sets up at least a pattern you can verify by field inspection.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So if there was something that could be done to assist you in gaining that information, advising the public about that.
I mean, the phone calls that we get from the residents, I think are great, and they're a huge help. And it's probably one of the reasons why we're getting more, compliant landscaper blowers. And also, because it's very difficult to tell what is compliant and what isn't compliant just by the sound.
Yeah.
What we might think is a compliant, maybe not compliant. Okay, and that's why we have to really physically see the tag on the blower in order to know.
Counselors, can I chime in here from the law department's perspective for just one moment?
Go ahead.
Sure. So generally speaking, in our discussions with ISD and our discussions about enforcement generally, we've always said that, citizens can provide information that forms the basis of a investigation. So, when they file a request for zoning enforcement or something, but it can't provide the basis for a ticket or a citation in and of itself. So, and I think, Councilor Baker, your question kind of walked this line of saying, if we can't necessarily receive a call from a resident and then take that as the basis of a ticket. Is there anything else that we could do there? And that, I think, is really a capacity and a resource question for ISD, because it won't be able to form the basis of a citation. So it really goes down to whether or not ISD has the capacity and has the systems in place to kind of issue some sort of pre-warning or pre-communication that says, we weren't able to investigate this, but you have been, we have received information suggesting that you have violated the ordinance. And like I've said, it wouldn't be able to be a kind of legal citation or anything to that effect. So it really comes down, Anthony, to whether or not ISD has the resources and ability to carry that out.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Councilor Baker I think you understand that. I think, his question is geared towards, is there a conversation to say,
Well, I guess what I'm interested in because there are some people that I can, we've seen who are violating and then disappear, and they're just not available for a ticket, or they are, and I'd like to sort of include them somehow in the enforcement pattern in a more structured way rather than just the fact that he's there. So I think that I appreciate the point of the law department. It may be that there is some adjustment to the information on the web and to the enforcement process that we can talk about offline.
Okay.
Because I do think that some of the examples from other jurisdictions indicate to me that there's information being sought from the public, which is being helpful to them.
But wouldn't the phone calls from the public, like we've been receiving, do the same thing?
They would, but some of them, for instance, are say send photographs and other information, because not everybody makes a phone call. And
I mean, photographs would be great too. Yeah, I mean, things like that would be great, but it would have to be done, I would think, on probably more like the 311 where you could post a.
And that's what I'm getting at, is that I think there are ways to maybe adjust the 311 process, and the calls that go to police are obviously phone calls, right, because you have no other vehicle for that. And then, so if it's agreeable to the committee, what I would like to do is have a conversation further with Steve about some of these examples from other situations and see how it might be helpful to him and helpful to us. Aside from that, I'd just be curious about members of the committee about going all electric in uniform, as Councilor Kunstman indicated, regime at some point. Other communities have done that. Is there sentiment for that? I'm not saying we should do it tonight, but I just think, think about that question.
I'm happy to hear from other members of the committee. I will say that I'm open to it. And I think it is interesting. I think my preference at the moment is to at least give a couple of seasons to see how the current ordinance is working. I think we too quickly keep changing what we're doing. We don't give any solution enough time to take hold. But I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed going all electric. I'm hesitant to, keep sort of moving the goalposts, as it were. But I think maybe you and I talked offline or something about other communities doing it, and I do think it's interesting.
Well, Lexington and Cambridge are sunsetting their gas powered locomotives in sometime in 2025. So
I mean, the violations would be more clear cut. We have this problem of landscapers who violate the ordinance, and then they disappear like a blown leaf after yard waste day, like a raked leaf after yard waste day. How about that? Yeah. Councilor Maliki or Oliver, do you guys want to weigh in? I'm happy to hear from you guys. Councilor Maliki.
I'll comment on that, and I had a couple of questions too. Quick question, I don't know who knows. How long do reflows in use by landscapers last?
I didn't hear.
How long do reflows last?
The actual machines?
Yeah, machines.
I don't know. Obviously, it would be something for the amount of time it's being used, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you mean like the lifespan of the product?
Yeah,
Like you need after 5 years, do you need to get a new leaf blower
my
anyway?
thought was if you wanted to go to all electric, to have a sufficient lead time so that we're not requiring landscapers who just bought gas powered that comply to have to replace them again.
Well, I think that the landscapers will still be able to do leaf blowing in other communities that will allow gas blowers. So I don't think they're not gonna use gas blowers. They may not be able to use them in certain communities like Lexington, maybe Newton at some point, so. I know some of the most of the landscapers now do have at least one electric blower so that they use in the summer. When they're doing some of their work.
Are there landscapers who are just working in Newton, or pretty much all of them working? in
I think they
Newton?
work all over. I think they work all over.
Are there any that are already all electric for some reason?
Not that I know.
Okay, so I had questions about, first of all, the spreadsheet of the violations. I was interested to be able to look at specific landscapers over time and see if behavior is a recurrent thing or if it's improving over time. Is it possible to give us a sort of this spreadsheet so that it's by landscape, by company, and within the company by date?
I believe you can do that on our website.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
on if you go.
Oh,
on
right,
the
they showed us last night.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
It's a little bit arduous to do, but it just takes
And it's
practice.
pretty easy. First you sort on the,
Yeah.
the second thing you want.
Yeah.
First sort on date and then sort on.
And if you do have a problem, I'm sure Deb Finwell could help you, if you showed up at the counter, she could explain.
Okay. And it looks like there are, so I think four types of violations, just scanning: unregistered, summer ban, over the decibel limit, or after hours. Are those all the categories, or is there one where you're using more than?
Did
one?
you say unregistered?
Unregistered.
Yeah.
And that's, they don't.
That's
they
it,
don't get
yeah,
registered at all.
you get a fine just for, or warning for us
Right.
for being unregistered. We have one landscaper who was actually suspended for a year. Because it was suspended for 60 days. And after the suspension, they had not registered yet. And they got caught 2 more times, which means they're banned for 1 year.
And have they gotten caught after that?
This is just recently this happened, so I'm gonna say no.
And the total of the fines, is that, have we collected all of that amount? or-
Yeah, everything that you see here, I believe is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there ones that are still being contested?
Yes, we go to court. How often, Kristen?
So there are a few suits that the city has affirmatively filed against the worst offenders, as kind of identified and categorized through the data that you all have in front of you. So we affirmatively filed 6 suits this year to collect on people who had, at the end of the season, after demand letters were sent and after other attempts to get them to pay, if they had what amounted to more than 3 tickets outstanding still at that time period. And these were people who had frequently had other offenses throughout the season and may have paid those tickets, et cetera. But at the end of the season, they had 3+ tickets, and that was 6 separate companies. We have since collected or reached agreements to collect nearly all of the outstanding ticket information from those companies. And our hope there is that by pursuing these worst and most egregious offenders, we're making a stance that the city does take this seriously, and this is in fact something that we are willing to pursue. And to Anthony's more direct point, people do also appeal tickets as they are issued. There is not that many. As Anthony said, the figures in front of you all represent the figures of the total amounts. And I think over the past year, I have 30 separate tickets were appealed to the district court by the company at the time that they were issued, and approximately 60% of those were upheld. So like Anthony said, tickets get issued to companies and sometimes they do push back. And the court really takes a varying approach, really takes in all the facts and decides them each on a case-by-case basis. But that being said, at times these are still being contested, but the types of contests we are seeing as we're moving along are more companies that are, receiving a one-off ticket and they're trying to say that they have a history of compliance and that they shouldn't be penalized in that effect. Whereas at the beginning, the pushback and the arguments that were being raised at these appeals were essentially that the ordinance was so new that they weren't aware of it. And we're not seeing those anymore, those kind of arguments anymore.
Can I just ask, you said 60% were upheld. What were the 40% overturned on? Just
So it's really various different grounds. The magistrate really, in one instance, for example, he was late, and because he had made people sit through, he ended up not upholding the tickets. In certain other instances, he has really given the benefit of the doubt to people who have said, you know, I received this one ticket and I have since changed my behavior, and I have received no other tickets since. And in those instances, the court tends to give them leniency. And
forgive me for
yeah.
not- what's the standard of review? Is it just purely up to the magistrate's discretion?
It is really at the magistrate's discretion. So these are also, and like I said, 60%, and I believe that is climbing. And initially some of the overhauls were because a warning hadn't been issued or we didn't have proof that a warning was issued. And since then practices have changed where, you know, now when Chuck goes out there, I understand he has an iPad and he takes photos.
That makes
So
sense.
as we've moved forward since this, we are seeing, you know, tickets being upheld on grounds that might have previously had them dismissed, et cetera. It's a process that we're moving through, and it's growing and changing. And but we're moving towards strong, you know, abilities to fight these in court.
That makes sense, and I mean, all of those mechanisms and the reasons for which there would be a potential, you know, overturn, those all make complete sense. So really appreciate that's really helpful and really informative. Thank you very much. Councilor Baker.
I have one other sort of procedural question. If you're somebody like the landscaper who has been suspended
For a year.
the homeowner's exemption is for using a registered landscape under the ordinance. If they're suspended, can we now ticket them? In other words, if somebody, because the homeowner, that's another way to make sure the suspension has teeth in effect, because
You ticket the homeowner.
you ticket the homeowner because it's now, he's registered but suspended. And the question is, does the ordinance give us the ability for you to ticket the homeowner?
I would have, well, I'm not absolutely positive, but I think so, okay? I don't know if
Does the
Brendan
ordinance say
would,
like inactive valid registration?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. Because that might be a small adjustment we would make, because I really would like to have your enforcement power. You know, because the whole idea about giving the homeowners an exemption if they use a registered landscaper was to get to use compliant landscaper. If they're not a compliant landscaper, then the rationale goes away. So if there is a small adjustment, like the chair indicated, to say a currently validly registered, I would support that amendment just so that it would make clear that you have the ability to do it.
Okay.
I would also support that, and it's the type of thing where if there is a suspension, well, let me ask you this, I'm sorry, may I?
Yeah, please.
If a registered landscaper is suspended, say for 60 days, I know we only have one instance of a year long, but if they're suspended for 60 days, is there any type of ability to send a notification to homeowners who you know have used that landscaper, or is it difficult to know? You may only know the address where they were found.
Where they were found, yeah, which would be very limiting.
So at a minimum, we can notify that homeowner, potentially.
Potentially.
I think that the point is, as I'm hearing from other jurisdictions, that when the homeowners feel that this is at their risk, and if they're using a landscaper that you can report and say, and maybe this is an appropriate place, you know, you've done the warnings for homeowners, right? And maybe that the ordinance is adjusted to say, if did you know that you were using
An unregistered.
not registered, but you know, suspended. And the next time they're there, you will get the ticket. In other words, treat that the same. And I guess the question for the law department, and maybe we should hold the item until we get an answer, is whether there's a small adjustment in the ordinance that will make your enforcement power more effective.
Yeah.
In that way.
Okay.
So I can say that as it's currently written, the ordinance supports ticketing of an owner who is using an unregistered company. And I think registered but suspended can equate to unregistered. So I do think we have the legal ability to ticket someone in that situation, but certainly if there's.
If you don't need an amendment, that's great. I
Yeah.
just, if you can, ticket the homeowner for using, violating, you know, suspended landscaper, that's an important thing that I hope you will do, because.
Right, and to that end, I think the ordinance as written currently does support that outcome.
And could I hop in here quickly?
I just want to ask one question, which is, the homeowner gets notice of the registration by going to the website and seeing the list of registered landscapers. Is that updated to show when a suspension has occurred, so that
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
we could at least say that the homeowner has notice? Okay.
I would add, Anthony, that if that's not a practice we currently do, that is something that we should fix the online list to note if somebody is suspended so that we can move forward with that ticketing. Because it would have to be public notice that they're not, that they're operating,
Right.
despite suspension.
Understood. We want to make sure that the homeowner has notice. of all-
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Typically, usually we'll put a door knocker on saying, giving them a warning, so.
Right,
the homeowner.
but I think what we want to do is make sure that the fact of suspension is a public, public information.
Yeah.
Just like the registration.
I think our acting chief wanted to jump in here. I apologize. Chief McBain.
Yeah, I think you answered some of that. So I have extensive working knowledge of the Newton District Court magistrates and how they work. The homeowners either have to know or they should have known that this landscape company is suspended. So I think we've already talked about that. Somehow the homeowner has to know if they're using George McMahon's landscaping for 2 years, all of a sudden they get suspended. Somebody has to notify them, or I don't want to waste everybody's time writing citations and they just get thrown out. So there has to be some notice to the homeowner that this company is indeed suspended.
Okay, well, I think maybe that's a case with a warning, the ticket on the door should say that you're using a suspended landscape, right?
If we know, again, I think.
Yeah, and I
We
believe
don't
there are
know,
check
yeah.
boxes on those markers that say warning. One may say suspended, one may say unregistered. I would have to check.
But I think that's again, if you could check, because again, I think the chief's point is absolutely on. The magistrate won't uphold a ticket if we can't.
If they were not notified.
Right. Right.
So,
Councilor Maliki.
Yeah, just wondering what would be considered notified though, because, okay, so if you put a door hanger on the door of the house where the violation occurred that caused the suspension, that's great, that homeowner knows, but any other homeowners that use that landscaper aren't gonna know about that unless they go to the website
Right.
every time.
Yeah,
there's
but
an-
we don't know who their clientele is.
Exactly.
It's
So-
nearly
I know,
impossible.
I understand, I understand that, but I'm just wondering if,
but I think what I'm hearing is that the police or Mr. Ederhay could put on a door, they get somebody who's operating a suspended, a
Yeah.
suspended operator. Not only they are in trouble, but they put a tag on the door of that homeowner saying you're using a suspended.
oh, yeah.
And so at least that homeowner knows.
Right, but what Councilman
I don't know.
Maliki is saying is the
The
other
other-
owners who are using whatever that landscaper is that is suspended, how are they gonna know? And then all of a sudden they're gonna get
Unless they sort of take the initiative to every time their landscaper's gonna come or every week or
or
whatever.
just
Check the
continually
website,
look
my
at the
guy- my
website
guy's still okay.
and see
Yeah.
if this is.
So I think the door knocker is gonna give you your best shot.
I do too.
Cause I think the list ought to be updated anyway. 'Cause-
And also, so when we do put the door knocker on, we also snap a picture of it. Okay, and that way that goes up on the complaint also. So I had a gentleman come today, it wasn't today, it was yesterday. And it was just the conversation that we're having now about a door knocker saying he was on a street name that was Chuck had ended up putting in the wrong street. Same first letter, I don't want to mention the street, but he hung it on his door, took a picture of it. And the homeowner came down and also took a picture of the violating, landscaper, his truck. And so the homeowner came out and said, well, this, this shouldn't have been put on my door, it's got the wrong address. So I was helping him at the counter, and I said, oh, okay. So I says, let me look at it. I go, what's your address? And he gives his address, and I look it up. And I saw there was a request for zoning enforcement. And so I said, do you use so-and-so landscaping? He goes, yes. I go, and I turn the monitor to him, I says, is that your front door? And he's like, yes. I said, well, that is for you then. And it had the green door knocker on it. So, and he just said, okay, thank you, and just walked away.
Well, I guess the question, what I'm hearing is the law department's view is that we don't need an amendment to the ordinance to deal with the suspended landscaper. Is that correct?
That's correct. As long as there's notice given to the homeowner, whether through constructive notice of updating the online list or the door knockers, as ISD is discussing now. As long as there's that notice, the current ordinance supports ticketing homeowners who use unregistered and suspended leaf blower companies.
I don't think we need to adjust the ordinance then. I think this is just we might continue the conversation about ways to enhance your ability and the police department's ability. But I don't hear sentiment from my colleagues to go to a uniform ordinance yet. I think that any other members of the committee, Councilor Oliver, do you have any views on this?
I think that some of the more salient points, at least for me, that I've heard so far have to do with, the enforcement is happening. I think I heard the commissioner mention that the trend is towards more compliance, which is what we're after. If I heard the numbers correctly, we've got roughly 30 some odd tickets that were kind of appealed. 60% of those stuck. That means, let's see, roughly 12 of them, I believe that math works out, were tossed. I think that's proving that this is working. I think that if we continue to kind of hone in on the folks who are maybe suspended, and allow homeowners to kind of be part of that process and be able to say, look, I'll just build on Mr. McMain's or Chief. I think I can say Chief McMain's because I heard that the other night. He's kind of, okay, fine. Okay, so I'll go with Acting Chief for now. Acting Chief McMain's landscaping company has been suspended. As a homeowner, you're not allowed to use them right now without paying a fine. Once we start to engage the community in that way, I've got to imagine we're going to see some exponential changes in behavior out there. At least I would hope so. If for no other reason than peer pressure, right? Neighbors kind of having chit chats over the fences, so to speak. To that end, I mean, if I would think that having more of a uniform, policy across, a calendar year would be beneficial, but, I'm not involved with it on a daily basis, so I'm listening with all ears on that one. And it does seem to me like we've got something here that is working, right? We've got almost two full seasons, right, with this in place. Let's see what we get after, two full seasons and perhaps revisit.
Also, we had, I believe we had the mayor's newsletter in the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Talk about how residents should be using a registered landscaper. And even now, I think we have the city is in compliance also, which we had issues last year. We made sure that various departments were using landscapers, but they weren't all in compliance. So we made sure that all city departments would be in compliance.
Thank you. So,
Yeah,
Councilor
so you
Baker,
have-
did you want to make a motion on this item?
One quick question, if they are suspended, do they lose that sticker on their equipment?
The equipment is placed here by the factory.
I was just talking about the registration sticker on the truck.
Oh, you talking about the registration on the truck,
I think
the bumper sticker? I don't think so, no, we don't, we wouldn't be taking that off, yeah. But again, we're not just looking at those. They may be registered, we may know that they're registered, but if we see that they're using a non-compliant blower, we're still gonna ticket them.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that, but I'm saying for if somebody's suspended for the 60 days or the year or whatever.
They do not,
They don't use it.
no, we don't take that.
I think it's just physically hard to do that.
It would be, and now we're talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
maybe damaging someone's truck
Yeah.
to remove something, so we don't wanna go there with that.
All right, so I'm just gonna move, hold on this item so that we can revisit it again later.
Counselor Baker has moved hold. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Acting Chief, appreciate that. And
Thank you,
Commissioner,
folks.
I'll follow up with you after, and there's some specific things that may enhance your capacity there.
Okay.
But it's good to know that the suspension process is cleared up. That's very useful to know that about stuff.
Yeah.
All right, I believe the same folks are joining us for the next item, which is item 338-24, a request for review and strengthening of section 20-13 noise control standards for repetitive impulsive sound. Councilor Maliki, you filed this item. I'll give you an opportunity to tell us why and what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay, so let me start off. I was hoping to get YouTube on my computer, but I can't. I'm gonna have to do that here and just one meter on here, but I'll just have to do the YouTube on here. So this started back in November of 2021. And a resident of Exeter Road got in touch first with the mayor, actually, Linda Lozonda started out about what turned out to be a rock grill sound. And this is what it is like. Okay, so this was going on for about 4 weeks. There was a house on the Wayne Circle where it was a tear down, they were doing
You made the point, but I couldn't hear you.
Okay, all right, okay, I just wanted to give you a flavor, see how long people can take it and not very long.
No, I just wanted to hear what you had to say.
Okay, it was a excavation to make apparently a bigger basement for tear down, rebuild. And it required, it ended up being like 4 weeks of that. And started, 7:30 in the morning, they could go until our, regulated hours. Mr. Carrillo and Mr. Ellis, and they went out and checked it. And it was within the, limits of
90 decibels.
90 decibels as measured at the property line. And I have, and I can give this to Ms. Norton for the report, but I can just read a few of the exchanges of emails to give you a flavor of what it was like for these people. So it started out the November 13 to Mayor Fuller, but via Linda Lozonda. I'm contacting you due to the excessive noise from pile driving, mistakenly called it pile driving activities on the Wayne Circle. This has been going on for days and makes it very uncomfortable for neighbors as the pounding noise continues all day. There are other methods of building a house that are far less disruptive to neighbors. House developers should not be allowed to disrupt their neighbors to this extent. Please look into this. Current situation not acceptable with quiet Newton residential neighborhood, especially on a Saturday. On the Monday, work noise resumed again at 7:30 a.m. I was mistaken. It is not pile driving, but rather hammering of ledge to break up the rock to allow for the developer to dig it out and build a big basement, a big new house. When I spoke to the contractor Saturday afternoon about how long the activity would continue, he proudly and defiantly told me 3 more weeks, Monday through Saturday, all day long. This is really not a good situation for a residential neighborhood. I'm skipping around here. When this permit was issued, ISD should have understood that there would be 4 weeks of pounding ledge removal with all the noise and impact on the neighbors. And perhaps the better decision would have been to tell the developer, you can build a new home in Newton, but not if there will be 4 weeks of such loud disruption and of ledge. Monday, Linda Plazanja wrote to the same resident of Oxford Street. The zoning enforcement inspector spent some time at the site, tested the decibel level on several occasions. They were found to be below the threshold set in the ordinance, and therefore there is no violation. Wednesday, the resident responded to Linda. Thank you for requesting ISD make periodic visits. Of course, just because the decibel level of this constant almost 10 hours per day hammering is below the permitted level does not make it good or right. Every elected official in Newton should try and spend 4 weeks listening to this noise from their home and then decide if it's okay for the kind of community we want in Newton. As a minimum, this level of noise should not be permitted on Saturdays, and if a project requires more than a week of rock hammering, then it should not be allowed. How much disruption is it reasonable to ask of neighbors? Wednesday, again, this is continuation. Beyond, this is a different resident, the next door neighbor who is the direct rear abutter. Beyond the problems of persistent noise pollution, and today when the larger hammer, there was 2 different hammers, was back at work, I measured the level at around 80 decibels, again, under the limit, but when both hammers are simultaneously at work, undoubtedly the 90 decibel threshold is approached, if not surpassed. I have some concern over the potential structural impact on our properties from weeks of hammering. In our basement, more than 100 feet from the work site, I can feel the vibrations emanating from the work site. And then Thursday, this is the first email I got. Julia replying to you here, your video is showing the smaller of the 2 hammers at work. This is the first video, and I put a link in what I will give you. You can see the larger machine digging in your video. The hammer for the larger machine is quite a bit bigger and louder than on the smaller machine. And then on Monday, November 29, I was back from Thanksgiving in Maine, and I go to Anthony and I guess Andy and everyone else that was on this email. I went by the Ruane roadside of the construction. The site, this is the map.
Cul-de-sac, right?
Yeah, so the house with the construction was at the end of the cul-de-sac. Exeter Road is over here. The first fellow who wrote, Tony, was not quite a rear abutter, sort of catty corner. Second fellow was directly the rear abutter. I heard it from his backyard. I heard it from over at Ruane Road, and then on across the street on Ruane Road. The larger of the 2 hammers was going, not the smaller Bobcat one. Standing at the construction fence on Ruane Circle, I got decibel readings in the 70s and spiking to 80 with just the 1 hammer going. I asked the neighbor on the opposite side of Ruane Road to take a decibel reading with my phone inside their house. This was still COVID, so I wasn't going inside. And he told me he got over 60 decibels inside his house. By the way, general construction, general conversation is like 50 decibels, and that is comfortable. But
I don't want to cut off
Yeah.
where are you taking us with this?
where I'm taking you is that I think our current ordinances do not address this specifically annoying and rearing type of sound. The decibel, if you're listening to a certain decibel level at, for example, this is conversation, it's about 50 decibels. Busy office on my meter when I play it, it's 60, it calls an office, but the same sound that's measured, the same rock drill sound measured at 60 is a heck of a lot more wearing on you psychologically. And we've taken measures to sort of protect buildings from damage from vibrations and, whether it's continuous vibrations or explosions.
This would come under the vibration ordinance now. So if they're gonna be,
It protects buildings.
yes,
But
yes.
it doesn't, we haven't protected people. we haven't protected people from the kind of the psychological impact of if you're, especially if you're, you know, if you're work from home, if you're, you know, God forbid, housebound because you're in hospice care or something like that, if you're kids that are below school age, if you're, you know, neurodivergent kids who are very sensitive to any type of sound, or just regular people who don't want to listen to this, something like this 10 hours a day. We don't have a solution for that. And as Linda Gonzanja told the resident here, it's the city council that decides what the ordinance is. So we've got to.
So the
Council
question,
Yeah.
I guess the question is, what would you like to see as a change?
Okay, I would like us to think about, and you can go home and listen to, I've got 11 minutes straight of rock drill sound. See how long you think you'd like to listen to that. You can put a decimal meter app in your phone.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Tell me what you
Yeah.
want as a.
I want us to figure out what's the reasonable decibel threshold limit, say measured out the property line or whatever the, you know, appropriate regulation is. What is a appropriate upper limit for this type of sound? What is, and maybe in combination, what is a sort of maximum number of, say, hours per day or weeks or whatever to.
But I think that's sort of what the noise ordinance is now. So are you proposing some
Well,
change
that's
to
why-
that? Like, do you think that the
Exactly.
threshold is too high?
It's too
The
high.
hours are too
It's
long?
Too high. People were listening to this for, in this case, 4 weeks. Now, this may,
Yeah.
it's a rare situation. Not everybody has to drill ledge. And maybe other companies are better able to figure out how much ledge they're gonna have to drill and how long it's gonna take them. But these people weren't.
Let's assume that this is difficult, very difficult situation for
Yeah.
these people. I'm just trying to get to, you changed the decibel level, it sounded like even 80 was, they were getting 80 readings. So even if you wouldn't solve this problem. I guess the question is whether the mode of construction itself is what you're really after, as opposed to trying to figure out whether you can use it for a day. I mean, pneumatic drills are used on street construction all the time because it's how the utilities get into them. So I think it would be difficult to ban them altogether, but I am sympathetic to the concern that someone is basically chiseling out foundation at an extended period of time right nearby somebody's house. And that
4 weeks straight, yeah.
yeah, just really straight. So what I'm trying to figure out is what is the change that would
Right.
allow legitimate activity, but not allow the kind of situation you described.
Right, that's my question too. That's why I'm wondering, did you speak to others about this or get an opinion from someone about what an appropriate amendment might look like or what would address this?
That's why I brought it here.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
Um,
it seems like, you know, when it's road work, it kind of has a defined, it's got a limited time. And you kind of know, they come in and they actually, if they have to do it after hours, they come in
Yeah.
for a noise waiver. But there's kind of a limited time, even things like actual time driving, like has been going on at Dunstan East / Washington, whatever, crossing. They knew exactly how many piles they had to drive. They could tell the neighbors how long it's gonna take and, you know, what the time frame would be, and they didn't do it during somebody's birthday party or whatever. But in this case, there was sort of no guardrails. The contractor could just keep doing it and doing it, and doing it. They had no, that the
Right, I mean-
residents had no sense of when is it really gonna be done.
So,
Right.
I
They
mean,
couldn't make plans.
Let me just go, Councilor Getz has raised her hand, let me.
Yeah, I actually was recently contacted by a resident that was dealing with, we were trying to actually figure out where the noise was coming from. And the belief is that, because there's a construction site, you know, a couple of doors down from me, and the sound actually amplified quite a bit, because she was many streets over, but my guess is that it was the cutting of the foundation. So I do think that we really need to, as it's getting into a conversation now about the different types of noise. I think that there's a distinction with construction site noise, whether it's blasting or well, it's not blasting, it's actually jackhammering ledge, or what was my neighbors and my people in my ward were experiencing was the actual cutting of rock or foundation. So I do think that there needs to be, reasonable length of time sort of provisions put in place, as well as decibel levels. And I believe that what we need to do is look around. I was looking at Boston's, and they do have decibel earmarks. So I think of it as notice, but also, because if you're prepared, you can either not be around or it's coming. But there's a big distinction if what Councilor Baker was suggesting, if they're actually jackhammering ledge and it doesn't stop for weeks. That's a completely different scenario than someone who's spending. But I know that this one that was happening around me was a full day, if not 2 days of, cutting foundation. And it's a pretty jarring noise for anybody who's, working from home and needing to concentrate and listening to that all day long.
Thank you. Counselor Oliver?
Yeah, thanks. Listening to this, what I'm starting to hear, and I think Counselor Getz kind of got at where I was headed, which is more along the lines of setting expectations, right? Like perhaps part of the creation, if you will, of the the CMP, right, construction management plan, needs to include some sort of a, how we post these things out on the fence so that passersby can see what's going on and see the permit and so on and so forth. Maybe there's some way that we need to or could provide some relief by saying, look, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 23rd, 4th, and 5th, it's going to be loud. We are going to be creating dust. We are cutting the foundation or whatever. Now, granted, that information is only going to be as good as the plan is as long as the plan is intact, the information is good. Because I don't think what's realistic is to prevent this type of activity, because construction can be loud. It can be pretty disruptive for periods of time during the entire process, but helping people to understand, well, how long, when's it going to happen and how long might it take, I think can hopefully go a long way to alleviating some of the stress about it. Anyway, just a thought.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. Councilor Baker?
Well, certainly, I think that's a useful idea. I guess my question is that I would, before I would act on this, I'd like to know just the pattern of other communities, because you could take a position that says that jackhammering ledge for foundation is limited to 4 days, and as a presumption, and if there's more time needed, you have to show good cause and something above and beyond that. And I mean, you could set a threshold that because one of the problems, and this gets at some of the tear down issues, some of the reasons that we're concerned on the zoning and planning side is that people are taking sites that are fine for an existing structure, and they're making much bigger houses on them, which changes the character of that particular neighborhood. We've been concerned about that anyway. Seems to be kind of anomalous to say we're concerned about that in one end, but you can go ahead and build a foundation for it and annoy everybody around you for 4 weeks. So I'm sympathetic to some adjustment in our ordinance, but I'd like to have a sense from Councilor Maliki or ISD or whoever can do the research about what other communities have done. Because I don't think there's a big public interest in allowing somebody to spend 4 weeks building out a big foundation on a house that's going to be another big house.
To be honest with you, the machines have gotten quieter, if you could actually believe that. We would constantly, I'd say before COVID, the ram hose, which is that jackhammer portion that's on the excavator, would frequently go over 90 decibels. And you'd have to stop and have them put sound blankets up. But then the way the ordinance is written, if you did put the sound blankets up and made some sort of an abatement for the sound, they could jackhammer even if they were over 90. But these machines now, like you said, we were getting readings around 80, 85. As annoying as it is an annoying sound, 100%. But they are quieter than what they used to be. We tried to be, we tried to tell the complainant that, you know, the more they get the hammer, the quicker it's gonna get done, and the sound's gonna go away. What happens, I think, if we're gonna put restrictions on, say, time, it's just gonna prolong that jackhammering that's been going on there, that's been annoying them for the past few weeks. Other alternatives to this type of work is blasting. And many more residents are very hesitant to see have blasting going on. I mean, it is construction. If they have to reach a certain depth of frost to meet the frost line, they have to meet it from building code. I can't speak for the size of the homes. Maybe restricting them to maybe starting at 9 and finishing at another certain time would be a little more palatable for the neighbors. I don't know.
See, I just think the length of time, even if it's only gonna last a week, if it's, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, that just seems inhumane to me. And if something needs that much rock drilling, I have to question why we're allowing it, why we're allowing people to drill out that much ledge, if it's impacting other people, if it, in the middle of Northland or someplace, and there's no houses around it, and no offices around it, and nobody is being subjected to it, fine, but when you're adjacent to where people are living and working, and as I said, people who don't necessarily have the option to, head out of the house for 2 hours.
I mean, the special permit will usually come with its own.
This is not.
No, I'm distinguishing between Northland, which,
Yeah.
I mean, you have different latitude there with a special
I'm
permit to do
just
it,
using
but.
that as an example.
Totally understood.
A large, a distance from.
Yeah. I want to go, we've been joined by Councilor Farrell, who I know was at another committee earlier dealing with some other matters. So I want to welcome our committee member, Councilor Farrell, who has raised his hand on this item. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you. I don't know whether my 2 questions are appropriate for this, but has there been discussion of the hours that construction is allowed? And secondly, is the backup sound of large constructive vehicles considered a repetitive, impulsive sound? Beep, 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 beep.
That was spot on. Thank you. Though I didn't know what you were talking about. I think, let me answer it this way. We've sort of talked about 2 things. There is the existing ordinance, which has hours limitations during the day and it has noise limits in terms of how loud the sound is. I think we're operating under the presumption that this noise was within those constraints in terms of the hours of the day and the decibel level. One way to approach this is certainly to look at those parameters and whether they're in line with either where we want them to be, where we think they should be, whether they're in line with surrounding communities in terms of both of those things, hours of the day, the noise limits. Another thing that we are contemplating, or I think that Councilor Malachy has suggested, is there some type of additional language needed, which is either particular to the type of instrument being used, the tool being used, the type of noise being made, or the type of work being done that would address this situation, which I think we can all agree sounds horrible to have dealt with. and really annoying for the neighbors. And we're sort of open to, you know, what that might be or where that might come from. Does that answer your question, Council Carroll?
Partially, could you please tell me what the timelines are? I understand them to be 7 to 7. And if that's incorrect, I'd like to know. But we have had a construction project run by the city, actually, for the past 2 weeks, where they're starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. And at that point, may I say, the backup sound of large construction vehicles does indeed fit under the repetitive, impulsive sound discussion that you're having. But again, I apologize for being late. I don't mean to have you, if these are inappropriate topics for the conversation, I can hold on that. Thank you.
I mean, let me just say, I think 2 things I would say in response to that, and I'm happy to open it up to whoever. My understanding is that the city is any city project should be in compliance with the noise ordinance as well. I don't believe that there's an exemption for municipal work outside of the noise ordinance. If I'm wrong about that, maybe Assistant City Solicitor Annunziata will let us know, because she's got her hands up and I'm coming to her next. The other thing I will say is that special permits usually include language around the particular noise restrictions on that particular project, which could be more expansive than the traditional hours, could be more restrictive than the traditional hours, and may actually speak to the noise as well. That's not to say that a municipal project would be a special permit. It's just to say those are the types of scenarios that one might.
Thank you.
That's not active. Okay. You all set, Councilor Carroll, for the moment?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Annunziata.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that, you know, the noise ordinance can be used to regulate noise and it can be used to regulate sound, but I would caution against moving towards using the noise ordinance as a means of regulating the types of construction activities that individuals and companies are able to carry out. Something like that may go beyond the bounds of what we're able to do locally. And that goes not just to, you know, a prohibition on certain activities, but also a effective constructive prohibition on certain activities by setting the noise volumes at a certain level where, you know, equipment cannot operate underneath that level. And that would be something that we'd have to discuss more with ISD to figure out what boundaries do exist for these equipment and these activities. Because as I've said, either constructive prohibition or total prohibition of certain construction activities is likely beyond the bounds of what we are able to do.
Okay, I'm a little puzzled by that. We can't bar certain kinds of construction activity. I mean, if we feel that it's in the public interest not to have that kind of activity go on, why can't we limit it?
Sure. So, I mean, it goes a bit to, it's a complex topic. It goes into a bit of property rights, et cetera. The law department has not looked into this since 2019. So if you all would like us to look into it further and update our understandings with local ordinances, et cetera, we are, you know, willing to undertake that. But there is a concern that, you know, the work someone is doing on their private property, say they are carrying out work in a manner that, if they're carrying out work in a manner that is necessary to the maintenance of their home, there's a question of, you know, are we able to prohibit them from carrying out that maintenance where they own that home? And then there is also a concern, and I don't have them in front of me, but about, you know, preemption and what the state regulates in terms of construction activities. So as I've said, we're happy to look into that further if that's something that the committee decides is appropriate.
Just literally sitting here, I just received an email from someone who emailed me about construction activity next door to their house in my ward that's been going on with a lot of construction vehicles and noise and disruption. And I guess what I'm hearing is we don't have tools available for that, but it does seem to me that the quiet enjoyment of someone's house is basic property law, that you have the ability to abate a nuisance a whole variety of ways. You can do it legislatively, or you can do it through judicial action. But
sure. And that's obviously the property law is one concern that we have. Another one is really that the preemption, as I've discussed, is that the, construction methods and the like are typically governed exclusively by the state building code. So there's a concern that if we attempt to prohibit something that's allowed under the building code, it's preempted and we're not able to move forward with that prohibition.
Well, I mean, this question is aside, I think this is an issue that's, but I'd have to report that is there any, for someone who's got a lot of activity, the trash pickup is blocked or other things, noise and dust, what remedies do we have? Do we have any remedies for people who've had their lives disrupted?
I think a lot of the reason why this may be even coming to a head now is that more people work from home now than they were a few years ago, which is maybe one of the reasons why we're getting more calls about this.
I understand, but that makes, it seems to me that the problem still requires a remedy. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what remedy. What I'm hearing from the law department is a caution flag about doing anything other than what we've got, which doesn't seem to me very helpful. I'm a little frustrated that we have a situation where I think we would all find it intolerable to live next to that racket or anything else. And,
Right, I mean, the thresholds sort of presume sporadic or, occasional
Yeah.
noise. They don't presume
sustained activity.
sustained activity to the limit all day, every day,
Yeah.
to the limits of the hours and the limits of the,
Of the activity. And I guess the question is whether we can set some limits so that people. Doesn't seem to me that there's an automatic limit to the redevelop your property to to take 2 years to the equivalent of, remember Buckner Boulevard, it took forever to get that built. And I guess the question is, can we do anything? I mean, I'm not hearing that there's much we can do, which is very frustrating.
my suggestion is gonna be that we hold this, but I think we should look into both, surrounding communities, see if there are any communities that have addressed something like this. And maybe, do some more research and come back to it, 'cause I'm certainly sympathetic to this, it doesn't sound like something we want our residents to have to live with,
Yeah,
but go ahead, Councilman.
a couple of thoughts. I did some preliminary perusing of, looking for impulsive sound regulation and outbreaks and all that, and I think it was Minnesota, there was an article, paper on it or something like that, and that commented it's more appropriately regulated at the local level, which sort of, states are different, but I could see where different towns would have different regulations. I'm not aware if the law department has any information on, or maybe we should ask our outgoing or incoming state reps. Is there anything at the state level in Massachusetts? But I guess I would disagree with Ms. Annunziato that this would be in sort of inhibition on property rights. I mean, I think the property rights of the people who are subjected to this are also important. As you said, the quiet enjoyment of your property, even if it's not literally perfectly quiet, just reasonably quiet. But there shouldn't, to me, there shouldn't be a kind of a God-given right to subject neighbors to any level of noise for any length of time, just so you can do whatever you want in terms of, in this case, excavating a basement. This is a parcel that, had a house on it and had a foundation. A properly designed house could have been built that didn't require going into the bedrock. So I guess I think there should be something we can do about it.
Yeah,
Council Baker.
I don't disagree, we should. I'm just trying to figure out what it is that.
I mean, there could be some sort of maybe a limitation of instead of 12 hours a day, maybe limited to 8 might be something, but keep the decibel range where it is. So it's, again, they're not starting at 7 o'clock, they're starting at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, or whatever time it is.
We do limit the start time on leaf blower use, different from construction.
I mean, our leaf blower limit is what, 70?
No,
65 rather.
No, but I'm talking about time of operation.
Right.
We have
There's
different.
different hours and different things. Construction 7 to 7, weekdays and, I
8 to
believe,
7 on
8 to
Saturday.
7 on Saturday.
I mean, you could limit Saturday, you know, just say that that's not appropriate. It's gonna stretch out the construction season.
Exactly.
But
That's what it ends up doing.
it does, but at least gives 2 days of
Yeah.
Sunday and Saturday.
Yeah, the weekend.
The weekend, and there's some, at least for this kind of high decibel activity, there might be some benefit to it. You know, and I guess the question is, that doesn't strike me as a major infringement on property rights. It's just to say the time of day, time, manner, and restriction is something we've done for years. But I guess the question is, do you want to, let's hold the item, but do you want to do some more homework, but
Yeah,
come
and
back and.
anything you can add or the law department can add.
I think the only thing I can think of is to say that, for this kind of activity, the noise level itself, the equipment is going to make noise. Question is, can you limit the time of day and the numbers of days it's going on? Without some further relief. In other words, that you can get a permit from the city that you would say, you can use this machine, but you must use it at certain times, like we do with Lakewood. And just say that, you can't operate more than 2 weeks without an additional permit and some sort of remedy, but I don't.
Just a couple of suggestions were, you know, no Saturday, none of this on Saturdays. Another was if it was gonna be longer than a week, it shouldn't be allowed.
I don't know if we can do that.
You mentioned the, sort of sound baffling.
Yeah,
or something
we'll have them
like
put up sound blankets
So-
if they're over the,
Sound blanket.
yeah,
So,
actually,
I know our-
basically drop cloths.
yeah, our existing ordinance says if it's gonna be over the 90, they have to put on sound blankets.
Right, that's typically when we.
How
have
much do sound blankets lower the decibel level?
them.
Something like that.
Again, we would take the sound, meter just on the other side of the sound blanket, which is right at the property line. So and typically, it would make a difference of bringing it up below 90. Problem is, you know, above 6 feet is open because the fence is only 6 foot high.
But you're talking about sound blankets around the fence.
Yeah.
I thought the sound blankets went around the equipment.
We've had them wrap the hammer with mattresses, foam, and ratchet tie them with all sorts of things on there. And to try to limit the sound and put sound blankets. That was probably the last one I really did the sound measurement on, and that was a few years ago. And what I'm trying to say is that the hammers themselves have gotten quieter. If that makes a difference, it's an annoying sound, I get it, okay? But,
Well, it sounds like the decibel level wasn't the problem.
Well,
So even if they're quieter, it sounds like that.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Well,
Like, that wasn't the concern.
it's a combination. I
Yeah.
think it's a combination of the decibel level, the fact that it's this repetitive, impulsive sound, and just for Carol came late, you wanted to hear it, you missed the introduction.
You want to do that over the motion to hold, as much as I appreciate that? I think it probably hurts the recording.
I don't know, but it's over on the,
It's a loud sustained noise.
yes.
If they were closed captioning, it would say loud sustained annoying noise.
So,
And that's a part, that's sort of
and, well, the problem that we're hearing, and I literally just read the email from a constituent, is that construction activity is disruptive to the neighbors. And the question is, what can we do about it? Right now, it doesn't sound we can do a whole lot about it, except hours of operation and days of the week. Am I hearing that? I mean, that sounds like about what we've got. So the question is, do you want to hold it? And I mean, the construction season will, by the time we get something through the city council, but we haven't heard from any of the builders or any of the people involved who want to be heard on this item. So I would as sympathetic as I am to the basic concern, I'd like to know what other communities have done. If we've got any precedents for time, manner, and place restrictions that we could point to and say, this is something that other people have done, you know, just like we know at Leafboro, some of them have gone to all electric. Meaning we would, so I think I'm very sympathetic to it, but I don't think there's anything we can do right at the moment other than hold the item and ask if you see what research you can do or get some help from other people to find out.
Yeah, I didn't expect to get it done tonight. I just wanted to get the concept out there that, and I really think we ought to be serving the interests of the general public and not tailoring our noise ordinance to allow construction, but tailor our noise ordinance to accommodate residents as a whole. And while there's not a specific case like this going on, as far as I know, I think this is the time to overhaul our regulations. Because this came up and there was sort of nothing to do about it because we had our regulations, the thing was already underway. But get developers on notice that these are new rules. Either get a really good idea of what kind of ledge you're going to be dealing with and plan around that in the context of stricter rules. And so the builders are on notice that they're not going to be able to do this anymore.
Well, the noise ordinance is itself an example of limitation because there are communities that have no noise ordinance at all. I mean, it's not that this is somehow novel idea. It's a question of whether the ordinance can and should be adjusted to reflect different conditions that people are at home or the kind of things that we used to take as a given were no longer feasible because of the kind of living style that most people had. And so an adjustment of the ordinance seems to be reasonable, but I'm not ready to say what it is yet until I know a little bit more about other situations. That's all. So
what I would suggest when you get the PDF, I've got links to.
And then you don't have to show me that. That's not going to. What I want is can you point to other communities that have something different as a result of the kind of concerns you've raised that we can look to?
We can do that, but somebody has to be first, just like Brookline was first on the.
If that's the case, then we can make that judgment too. Newton is not afraid to be first in a whole lot of things.
Right, we have that. I think smoking in bars, I
don't know about that.
Well, we got enough things to do. But I think if you can come back with some idea of what, even if you say it's there's nobody else who's dealt with this, right? I mean, that's news in itself. But I'm just not prepared to move any amendment or any change. Just on the basis of conversation tonight, as sympathetic as I am very much to this issue. So I wouldn't want to listen to that.
So do I take that as a motion to hold?
I move hold, sure.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor of hold, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that's 5-0. Great, thank you, everyone. Thank you for raising that, Councilor Malcolm. Last item 206-24.
Get something into reading.
Okay. Requesting complete review and appropriate changes to the rules of the city council. We are not voting on anything tonight, as far as I know. Just wanted to provide an update to the committee that the membership of the rules subcommittee has been slightly modified. I think you all hopefully saw the memo. Councilor Mickley, despite the fact that there were no meetings of the subcommittee, just was not meeting my standards. I had to take him off and replace him with Councilor Humphrey. Actually, Councilor Mickley wasn't interested in serving. Councilor Humphrey was interested in serving. I had been sympathetic to the fact that Councilor Humphrey was involved in a campaign prior to that, and I mistakenly thought that he would actually want to focus on that. So I tried to remedy that as soon as possible after that campaign was over, and make sure that Councilor Humphrey could participate in the subcommittee if he wanted, and Councilor Mickley was very amenable to that, as was Councilor Oliver, who was chairing the subcommittee. Hopefully, I will just mention, and Councilor Oliver, you can say anything you want, but Councilor Oliver did send something around to the full committee about the topics he intends to take up. I don't think that means other things can't come up during the deliberations, but he wanted to provide an opportunity for any counselors or anyone to submit topics that they thought ought to be discussed in that subcommittee. Has not heard a lot, but I assume is still open to hearing as we begin those deliberations. When tomorrow night? Is that when
Tomorrow
we're
night,
starting things?
tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
And we have, what are, I'm gonna butcher the exact number, but I have to imagine there's 12 to 14 different items. Some that have been left over from previous terms, a couple of others that are, that were just submitted this term, but I do want to encourage everybody on the council, like, hey, if there's other things that you want us to take up that fit into the rules, sooner the better.
Thank you. And speaking of things that are repetitive and annoying, Councilor Baker and I have addressed the rules a number of times. There are a number of subjects, but be that as it may. I'm happy to move hold on this item unless anyone has anything else they want to discuss on. Okay, so I'll move hold. Seeing no, sorry, Councilor Farrell.
Just a question on this rules subcommittee. When are you meeting? Where are you meeting? May interested parties attend, or are you a closed group?
No, as with any meeting of the city council or subcommittee of the city council, the meetings are open to any and all, and any counselor is entitled to participate as if they were a member. They may not have a counting vote, but any counselor may participate in any of those discussions. The subcommittee is meeting tomorrow night. I believe it's remote.
It's 100% remote at 7 p.m.
By the way, that is a rule of the council. If you can participate.
That's right.
Is that on the electronic posting?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's also in the Friday packet, so.
It is. There you go. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councilor Farrell. All right, so Councilor Princeman in his infinite wisdom has moved hold. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? 5-0 hold. That is our last item for the night. Can I get a motion to
So moved.
adjourn? Councilor Baker moved to adjourn. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. 5-0 adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.